All right. How's
Welcome,
everybody
everyone.
doing?
Welcome to our pre-inauguration Trump inauguration, second Trump inauguration live.
Yeah,
Pretty,
that's
uh,
right.
pretty intense energies. Welcome, everyone. We haven't been here in a while. We've had a tough couple weeks with the fires out here in Los Angeles, and we spoke about Jeff's dad last time we were on the podcast. He was ill, and he passed away yesterday,
Yep.
sadly, and
Yeah, he
so a
did.
lot's been going on. A lot's been going on. How you doing today, Jeff?
I'm doing all right. I'm doing all right. Yeah, my dad passed away yesterday, and in some senses, I'm happy for him because he was in such pain. He was living on medications, and he just didn't have a life, and he really wanted to go. So, one of the things I'll play here. This is kind of a cool little montage. This is my dad and mom. And that's a couple of different portraits. But my dad was a real motorhead. He really liked working on stuff. There's Tina and our dogs in the thing. And our family's always been around a lot of motorcycles. And of course, that started with my grandpa. And so it's been a fun journey. It really has. And we had our times and everything. And when someone passes away, it's always a recall. And I felt a huge amount of energy since he passed, no doubt about that, shifting. So they always say there's a lot of karmic ties, and it's very interesting in Vedic astrology where you can see the kind of karmic connections between your parents. And it's a big deal when your parents pass away because it makes a lot of shifts, I think, in your auric field, whether we're consciously aware of it or not. So really powerful, which brings us to the subject today that we were talking about, which is the inauguration. And this is a powerful, powerful inauguration chart. I'm actually going to share the screen on that. And one of the things that I'm going to do here, let me just do that real quick. And let me go to the entire screen here and just bear with me a second here. But one of the powerful things that I saw about this particular inauguration chart, in fact, first, let me do this. I'm going to put up just the inauguration chart itself. Now, as we know, most presidents are signed in at 12 noon on January 20th. And that's a time-honored tradition. And what that does is it puts the sun right at the midheaven in Washington, D.C. And you can see that right up here. So what's important about this chart and unusual is we have Taurus rising. And even though this is a tropical chart, we can look at it in sidereal, and we will in a minute. This puts Uranus and the Pleiades exceedingly close to the ascendant in this chart. This is something I've been talking about for a long, long time. And this is, World War II started on this, the Civil War, and so did the Revolutionary War. And if we go back through history, even though Uranus might not have been discovered, I can tell you Uranus has a very powerful effect as it goes across the constellation in the sidereal zodiac of Taurus. And it's sweeping over these extremely fixed stars. Now, here's the other thing. So that's not only is the world trembling here at war, and I have to tell you, this is some powerful energies that we're going to get into in a minute here, which kind of relates to Woodrow Wilson and the Federal Reserve Act and where we're going. Notice at the top of this inauguration chart, we have a Sun-Pluto conjunction. You might be able to see here, it's within 42 minutes of arc of conjunction. Now, plain English, 1 degree is 60 minutes. 42 minutes is literally less than 3/4 of a degree of conjunction when Trump is signed in. Now, granted, this can vary a little bit because we don't know if he's going to be actually taking the oath right at and be declared right at noon. But give or take, I can tell you it takes an entire day for the sun to move 1 degree. So it doesn't matter what time Trump gets inaugurated technically when he actually assigned it. But I can tell you this is exceedingly powerful because the entire day, unless he signed it at midnight, he's not going to miss the Sun Jupiter, I'm sorry, the Sun Pluto conjunction. This is exceedingly powerful. So the other thing is the moon is squaring Mars in the fourth house. Now, this is interesting. If we come over here to the sidereal chart of the Vedic, or you could say the Vedic chart, this is Trump's inauguration as well. And you can see it puts, and for anybody not familiar with astrology, this is the eastern horizon here in Vedic astrology. This is noon, this is sunset, and over here is midnight. Those are the four angles. You can actually see the cross here that I'm tracing. So the fact that the moon in the sixth house is squaring Mars shows there's going to be a lot of tensions. And again, we know what's been coming at us with the news. They are going to really make changes, this administration. And Trump, I can tell you, he is absolutely going to make changes, I think, that are more powerful than we've seen in probably 100 years, maybe longer. I think this is going to be an incredibly powerful chart and on not only the nation, but the world. Again, people often say, well, what does Sun Pluto mean? Well, it's very powerful transformations. It is energy where people really tend to say, okay, enough is enough. We're going this way. And a lot of people are going to agree with it. And a lot of people might not. So there's going to be resistance to this. But I can tell you, this is exceedingly powerful, radical changes. Why you've got Uranus in the ascendant, very close to, again, Capitalgo and all these stars in the Pleiades that I've been talking about. Plus, you got the Sun Pluto conjunction at the midheaven. I mean, that alone. And then you add Mars and the moon being in square. Now, both in the Vedic astrology and in the tropical, it is what we call a receive square. Now, people might say, what does that mean? Reception just means that you have a planet in the sign of another planet. And that brings what we call reception. It's kind of like if someone stops by and they're a good friend, they have a lot more freedom or latitude, you could say, than if someone who's a complete stranger, right? So when a planet aspects another planet, even by square, and there's reception, meaning it's in the planet sign, it's in the moon sign, Mars is, this makes a huge difference because it makes things mitigated, might be the better word, or it's not as harsh as a regular square that isn't received that would happen. So this is really, really powerful. The other thing, before I go back to the other screen, I want to show you what we call something in synastry. And what that means is I'm going to put the United States chart on the inside. I'm going to put Trump's inauguration chart on the outside. Now, here's some more good news. Jupiter is about to conjunct the United States Uranus in that chart. So this is the United States chart on the inner wheel where I'm circling here. On the outer wheel, this is the inauguration chart. You can see that down here. And for any of you on iPhones, you can zoom in or on a computer. But this is a good omen. Why? Because this means you're going to see radical changes in the way we do business with other people. And this is absolutely mirrored by what Trump has been saying. And I want to come back to this here. And I'm going to play you a couple of things here that Trump has said. And, you know, he's not making any bones about it. Here's something that, again, is a great statement by him.
Tariffs. I think tariffs are the most beautiful word. I think they're beautiful. It's going to make us rich. We're subsidizing Canada to the tune of over $100 billion a year. We're subsidizing Mexico for almost $300 billion. We shouldn't be subsidizing. Why are we subsidizing these countries? If we're going to subsidize them, let them become a state.
Did you hear what he just said? He said, let them become a state. So he's literally, you know, a lot of people have balked at this. I know the Prime Minister of Canada who's in, and Trudeau, oh, we're not going to let that happen. And Mexico, oh, that will never happen. But, you know, money talks. Money really, really talks. And, you know, I'll make a little bit of a prediction here. Woodrow Wilson signed this country over to the bankers, and nobody said it better than Aaron Russo. Let me play you this.
The real problem is the banking industry and the bankers in this country. That's where the real problem lies. That's the root of our problem. Well, that's why we've lost America.
And we did lose America. Woodrow Wilson in 1913 In fact, he said this on his deathbed. He said, I sold my country to a bunch of bankers. And it's very interesting, some of the comments that Trump has been making. He's talking about what Taft did with all the tariffs. I think we're going to see a change in this country, not just in energy and drilling and all that stuff, but I think we're going to see structural change. And remember, I've been saying the United States has been in a Pluto return. This is destruction and rebirth, Phoenix rising out of the ashes. And I think what we're experiencing here is far bigger than just Trump himself. I think there's been a war going on at the top of the pyramid between the kind of, you could say, demonic bankers, the ones that want a new one world order, and ones that want sovereignty and nationalism. And I can tell you, my opinion is, based on everything that I can see, is the nationalists just won. Now, they're not, the globalists aren't going to just go away. They're going to cause a lot of trouble. This is the Uranus that is crossing over all these very powerful fixed stars for actually the next year and a half, 2 years. Wilson was also criticized that not only did he bring in the Federal Reserve, but he was criticized because he bellied up to a lot of the bankers who funded the whole Hitler regime and World War II. So this is really interesting. And also, I should say, World War I and II precipitated out of the changes that he made. And, many historians may disagree or agree with me, but I believe, in my opinion, that paved the way with these bankers controlling and funding wars on both sides. Well, we're at a critical stage right now. World War III doesn't just mean, oh, we're going to have another war. No, it could mean the destruction of the human race. And I don't believe the divine powers are going to let that happen. And I think some really smart people at the top of the pyramid, including Trump, and whether you hate Trump or like Trump, it doesn't matter. What he's saying actually makes sense. Here's something else, like this is the first thing out of everyone's mouth. Oh, the tariffs are going to ruin everything. Well, listen to what he responded. And I think he's right on this.
Force them to drive up prices for their consumers. How do you make sure that these CEOs, that these companies don't, in fact, pass on the cost of tariffs to their consumers?
They cost Americans nothing. They made a great economy for us. They also solve another problem. If we were going to have problems having to do with wars and having to do with other things, tariffs, I have stopped wars with tariffs by saying, you guys want to fight, it's great, but both of you are going to pay tariffs to the United States at 100%. And they have many purposes, tariffs, if properly used.
And I got to tell you, when you look at money, I think it was Rothschild said it. He said, you give me control of the money, and I care not who makes the laws. Thomas Jefferson said, if anyone ever gets to print our money, they will be more dangerous than any standing army. Now you go to Panama. Now you talk about Mexico and Canada. This sounds wild right now, but could it happen? And Greenland, it could. And right here, it's the money. Follow the money. Everybody dances to the money. Some people say it's the root of all evil, but I'll tell you what, it certainly seems to be the root of all power as well. So, and if it's used properly, it could work. The globalists want us all to own nothing. They want us all to be happy about it and have the government tell us what to do, what to be. This is what Russia became. This is what China is. And, we're in a dangerous, precarious position right now in the world. And I think this inauguration chart astrologically shows we're going to see transformation. And it's not all going to be perfect, no question. But I think it's powerful, powerful transformation in a world that is really changing into a new high-tech era. I've been saying this since 2020. The United States and the world is moved into a high-tech era that's going to turn into the Jetsons. We're going to see not only AI, but releasements of all types of knowledge and energy is going to explode. And that's because of where the world is. We had the Industrial Revolution right when this country was formed. Now we're in a technological revolution like we've never seen before. And I also think consciousness is really going to expand. I don't think it's going to happen instantly, but I think we're going to see over the next few hundred years, we're not going to recognize this place in 20 or 30. I think we're going to see an explosion here. And one of the most important things, in my opinion, is the freedoms that the Constitution and the Bill of Rights gives. And I think you're going to see some real fight for that and transformation back to that, because technically for the last 100 years, we did get taken over by the bankers. And, another thing I will play here real briefly is Aaron Russo again came out with a statement about democracy versus a constitutional republic that I really think needs to be replayed, and I'm going to replay it.
If you ask 100 people on the street, what kind of government is America supposed to be? 99% of them will tell you a democracy. America is supposed to be a democracy. But that's a lie. That's an illusion. The word democracy is not written into the Constitution at one time. It's not in the Bill of Rights. It's not in the Declaration of Independence. The Founding Fathers hated the idea of a democracy. They thought it was the worst form of government there is. And I agree with them, because in a democracy, 51% of the people control 49% of the people. If you're part of the 49%, you're not free. America was founded as a constitutional republic. And in that constitutional republic that we have, 99% of the people can't take away the rights of 1%. You have your rights because you were born with them. You have God-given human rights that nobody can take away from you. The government, the majority, no matter who they are, I can't take away your rights. And that's what our founding fathers gave us. But the psychological operations that they do to us, they make us believe that we're a democracy and that majority rules. You see? And they want you to believe that. Because then they tell you this poll says this many want this and this many want that and this many want this. And it doesn't have anything to do with anything.
And I got to say, those are so true words. And I think when we look at what's coming in, everybody's not going to agree with it. But I think we're seeing a transformation here that's really powerful. And that's what the astrology shows. In fact, another guy said it another way, and I really like this one too.
But I'll tell you what they don't want. They don't want a population of citizens capable of critical thinking. They don't want well-informed, well-educated people capable of critical thinking. They're not interested in that. That doesn't help them. That's against their interest.
And for the last 100 years,
it's a big club, and you ain't in it.
And this might be this inauguration chart just might be the change. I don't think it's just going to be the border and the illegal immigration and all the drilling. I think we're going to see structural changes in this country we've never seen in the last 100 years. And let's hope it happens, because again, Thomas Jefferson said it best. If anyone ever gets to print our money, they are more dangerous than any standing army. And what's interesting is this is right when the tariffs stopped. This is right when the IRS came in. This is all these things happened from World War I forward. This country changed. And my prediction based on this chart is I think we're going to see true change at a core level we haven't seen in a long, long time. Why? That's the Pluto conjuncting the sun at the midheaven. That's raw divine power. And it can be intense, but I also think it's going to be transformational in a way that is really warranted and needed at this time. So amazing stuff. I got to say, the other thing that I want to mention too is that the Mars in the inauguration chart conjuncts the United States Mercury, which means there's going to be a lot of cutting, and all that we've heard about with, the budgets being balanced and changed a lot. We also have the inauguration chart's moon trining the United States Mars. So plain English on that one, a lot of action, a lot of swift, deft, intense action. And there's going to be a lot of heads rolling. And don't be surprised if we see many things that have been done here, not only the last 4 years, for a long time, be changed. I think things are going to be revealed. A lot of people have said, well, what about, disclosure and all the, extraterrestrial, or common, you could also say terrestrial energies that have been hidden here and thrown under. I don't know that they'll come out with everything, but I think a lot is going to start coming out. There's already a lot coming out. And we're going to see a lot of exposure of some very corrupt things that have been going on recently and also in the past year. And I really hope that that's the case, because, the original founding fathers, no one's perfect. We're all human. But I'll tell you what, I really encourage people to get a copy of the Constitution. It is absolutely amazing. And, I think you can get this thing for like $7, So it's not much money. And it really behooves people to read this. It's absolutely amazing. That in the Bill of Rights. It's absolutely amazing. And the sacred symbolism in the United States, the esoteric symbolism, is really bizarre. I mean, when you start looking at some of the ancient secret societies and documents, this is all over the place in the United States and also in the layout of Washington, D.C. I've played this many times. Washington, D.C. was designed by a French architect. Isn't it interesting? The French gave us the Statue of Liberty. And the synchronistic symbolism that is in Washington, D.C. and in many esoteric designs is very, very interesting. So, and I have to say, I think it was one of the founding forefathers said, there's no more danger of treason than someone who's inside the government. And of course, we hear these words, deep state, the swamp, all this stuff. Well, it's really just corruption. And again, Rothschild said it best, you give me control of the money and I care not who makes the laws. And, if you like Trump or hate Trump, he's a businessman. Even Joe Rogan said that on his podcast. He said, this guy's a businessman. And you know what? He's right. He is. And that's exactly what I think we need right now. And I think this transformation shown in the astrology of the Pluto conjuncting the sun, the Uranus in the ascendant, the operative word here is massive changes, massive, massive changes. Speaking of my dad, when I grew up, I grew up logging and working on stuff, semis and trucks. And, my dad was a little bit like a drill sergeant. You got your butt out of bed or you ended up across the room. And what was interesting is when I was a little kid, he used to bring me around to machine shops. My uncle owned a machine shop. I mean, I went in there, it looked like, something out of a sci-fi movie, with Back to the Future. I mean, he was like an inventor and all this stuff. He made steam engines, everything. It's really cool. And what was interesting for me is to see how America was so industrialized in the past. And that has just been a downward spiral. Look at what's happening here in California with the fires. People, even the liberals who totally voted, and I don't believe Gavin Newsom was totally voted in legally, but they're outrageous right now. And they should be. I mean, they should be incensed. I mean, the water in the reservoir was depleted. And if you look at the sequence of events leading up to this fire, I clearly have looked at interrogations. Something was really amiss here. There was some underhanded things going on. The fire department was impaired. And, these fire people, that's what they do. They put out fires. And when you take away their resources, they're not able to do it to the degree that they could. And then Biden flying in here right at the same time, let's have a press conference. Meanwhile, the helicopters and the planes dropping flame retardant can't fly. So it's very insane when you look at it all, and it's outright in some ways demonic the way you look at what has happened to California. And I think that is indicative of what we're going to see in change. And I can tell you, based on this inauguration chart, I would not want to be the government or the governors going up against the government, because they're not going to win. And this is going to be an interesting boat ride, and I think a good one, personally. I think it's going to be, for all the people who hate Trump, I say give it time, because I think this man is a lot more capable than he's given credit for. And when we look back, I think we're going to be mighty glad that America was saved. And I have to say, that's what this chart shows, with a lot of tension, but it's going to get saved. So we'll get into later more on Trump's, and we'll start returning more back to some regular podcasts. But, we can take it from there. My camera always goes out right when I'm talking, but whatever. So, what's your thoughts on all this, Ella?
Oh gosh. I mean, you can feel it, right? You can feel it all. You can feel the energy. You feel it coming. It's going to be exactly like you spoke to a second ago. It really is. You can feel it. It's interesting, Rhonda. First of all, thank you everyone for joining us. Hope everyone's doing well. It is a fired up time right now in the world. Rhonda has an interesting comment here. And I don't know if it might call for an interrogation if we can do that. But she's saying Biden in his last speech said something about the Statue of Liberty and movement. I wonder if that was some sort of hint that the statue is being targeted.
Well, that's an interesting point. I don't know. I'd have to look at an interrogation on that. I do see there's going to be a lot of resistance. There's a lot of protesters that have just arrived in Washington and don't think for a minute that the new one world orderers are going to roll over. They're not. In fact, I was bringing up Wilson a little bit earlier, and let me just kind of, I had a clip, but I won't play it right now. But Wilson did a lot of destructive damage, and I think it was because he was led to. And Biden, there's a real parallel between Biden and Wilson in some ways, different, but parallel. And that is that Wilson had a lot to do with making actions that brought Germany to power in the way that it came to power, right, in World War I, which also, got devastated in World War I, and then came back again in World War II. And you look at the bankers, the only way this could happen, right here, money. It's the only way it can happen. Money, it may be the root of all evil, but it's also the root of all power. I mean, in a non-communistic or capitalistic society, you got to have money. I mean, you talk to anybody, you can't run without money. And I think Trump's idea of tariffs is absolutely ingenious because it is where the root of the power lies. The United States has had the literally like locomotive engine of the global economy. I mean, when you really look at the amount of people we have versus the amount of people other countries have, like China or collectively all of Europe, the United States leads in every way. And they shut this place down, these bankers, and they've turned us into a credit, nation. And all the great industrialization has been lost. We shipped it overseas. Now, granted, there's a good reason for that. I mean, you're getting labor here. These people are working in cages and making, 10 cents on the dollar, if even that. And it's horrible conditions. But I think now as automation comes in and technologies come in, we're going to see, a different way to bring back low-cost manufacturing here. And technology may be our friend in that sense, even though technologies they always end up, in some ways hurting humanity and consciousness. But on the other hand, they help a lot too. And we're going to see some huge changes here. And I think innovators are definitely what's going to be the success of that. So, but yeah, I mean, we could see a lot of trouble here. There's no doubt in the process. Nothing ever is perfect. The human race always seems to, I always say, expand consciousness funeral by funeral, but also by, mistakes, ebbs and flows. And we have been in an ebb here. And I think at $36 trillion in debt, that's serious stuff. And there's going to be massive changes here.
Yeah.
Because this might be the opportunity to really wedge in and have the United States regain its power in many ways. And I think we're going to see that coming up here based on what I see.
Yeah. Two things here. Someone has said, money isn't the root of evil. The love of money is. And,
I could agree with that.
And Candace is asking, wonder what Jeff thinks about Eisenhower and his astrologer great-granddaughter who gives talks about Eisenhower, deals with the aliens visiting the White House. I haven't heard of this.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think extraterrestrials and terrestrials have been, and, everyone calls them aliens, extraterrestrials. And there's a lot of things. There was just a big special last night. I forget the name of it. Camille was watching it. It's it actually had Stephen Greer and so many disclosure things in it. And no question, the explosion of technology that happened in the 40s and the 50s, I think was largely due to sharing of knowledge. I mean, Area 51, there's so much going on with reports and credible stuff that shows we've had and are continuing to have a lot of involvement. And this is why, you know, the world, I always have to drop back to the spiritual. You really do. I mean, when you look at the tree of life, there's no question we are not in just a, you know, a tit for tat. I think the human race would have destroyed itself a whole long time ago if we wouldn't have had divinity somehow taking, you know, raining down into creation. And I always love to show this diagram because literally the Yetziratic world, which you can see way down below here, is literally what I would call where good and evil mix. And clearly it is a, you know, if you will, let me get me back here. Yeah, it is a blending of what I would call right down to the molecular structures of good and evil. In fact, every culture has a story of, like the Garden of Eden. There was a war in heaven, right? The Gita has it. The Vedas have it. The Egyptians, the Chaldeans, I don't care where you go, there's always a story of this war in heaven. And the evil spirits were cast down. And of course, God and the divinity win. And what happened is, I really think the Yetziratic worlds, which were shown in that diagram, is where good and evil blends. And what's so fascinating to me is the Vedas, the Upanishads, the Vedas, the Mahabharata talk about all of these divine beings coming into earth. They're born in the human kingdom, sometimes what we would call the alien kingdom, the animal kingdom, to balance creation so it isn't destroyed. And, you know, the Kabbalistic documents too, they talk about hundreds of planets just like this one. And it's very interesting why we have been kept from this knowledge. And, you know, I really believe this is where many of, I believe, the ancient stories of the gods came from, these people with magical powers. And of course, we see this in so many different cultures and monoliths and, you know, ancient sites that are here that are inexplicable how they got built. The pyramids are just one example, but in Stonehenge, on and on. So there's no way we would have had the knowledge of astrology. In fact, I read many texts that talks about the rishis, the seers, and some of the old Kabbalistic documents where literally they say angels had told them, or beings, you know, that are very advanced. One of my favorite was Rabbi Maharil, who said an angel brought him books on astrology. And he just couldn't believe it. He said, wow, this is incredible. He says, why can't I keep this? And as fast as he read, the ink on the page disappeared. He says, why is this happening? He says, because at this stage of consciousness, the humans need to go through what they go through, these trials and tribulations karmically. So it's really an interesting thing about Earth. It seems to be what I call the soul cauldron, where we all come here. It's like a big wash machine, and we're all stuck on spin cycle until we escape from this bondage of reality into a more expanded consciousness. And this is deep stuff. You know, it's interesting on my father passing away. You know, it was very interesting. My niece was in there, and when he died, and I haven't talked to her directly, but her father, which is my brother, my youngest brother, he was the one in the picture earlier with the little go-kart my dad and him were building. And she said my dad was talking to someone over by the wall, and they were having like a conversation. And, you know, he just never did stuff like that. So he was kind of in and out of his body. I had cast an interrogation. I didn't think he was going to live as long as he did. He actually lived a day and a half longer than I thought he might. And the doctor said it was a very peaceful death. He literally stopped breathing and then took one more breath, and he just peacefully died. So, and then my brother has been saying there's been strange lights going on and off in the house, and that happened when my mother passed away. So, and I've felt him a little bit around in a different way, but yeah. And I'll tell you, there's a meditation we can all do for our loved ones and our pets that actually bless them, where you can ask that, you know, all the stuff they did that was bad is not looked at, but their merits and good things were looked at. And you can actually invoke angels to help guide them into more conscious places. And of course, I hope that happens for my dad. My dad had a rough life, really rough life. A lot of alcoholism, a lot of medications. Back in the 60s, he had a back injury, and I remember that. And they removed a vertebrae, and he just lived a life on painkillers. In fact, at the end, he was taking handfuls of Vicodin, and the doctor said he's never met anyone who could take that much pain medication and have no effect. They put him on morphine at the very end, and that was barely working. So his nervous system was destroyed. And it's interesting how we all will exit these physical bodies in some way or another. I mean, some of us will die in a tragic accident. Some of us will just go to sleep. Others will just fade away. It's quite interesting. And I have to say, the Vedic astrology on my father was right on. He was in a Ketu dosha, Saturn antardosha. He had Mars aspecting his Ketu by retrogradation. And like I told my brother, I said, I just don't see him making spring or past spring. And that's exactly what happened. So again, you don't like to say astrology is guaranteeing an outcome, but it usually does. It usually mirrors when we are finished with this sojourn we call life. And it's very profound when someone passes away. It's very emotional, because we remember all the things that had happened. I mean, if you have a pet die or a loved one, no matter who it is, we always get this rush of recall. When he passed away, I had that. All kinds of memories started coming back to when you were a little kid, and all these things that you did and didn't do. It's a lot of stuff that comes back at you. So it's very, very powerful. And again, we got to go back to this on the global stage. This is a big soul cauldron. It really is. And I think what's so important for the United States right now is to become and stay the pillar it was originally at, and that is truly for freedom and for the ability for people to be able to explore whatever it is they want to do, as long as it's within the law and not hurting people. It's an amazing place. And that's why I think America was not able to be destroyed during this Pluto return. Why? Pluto returns are brutal. I mean, Pluto is brutal. It's literally like taking metal, throwing it into a melting pot, heating it, and it reforms into something else. And this is kind of where the United States is right now. And we've had really warring factions between the globalists and the nationalists pulling at us very hardly. And I can tell you, if this next administration, this isn't just Trump, he's going to be putting in and replacing the DOJ with Pam Bondi, which I think is wonderful. You got Kash Patel's likely to get in. You've got Pete Hegseth, in the Department of Justice. So this is a major change. And there's no question the people who were in power are not going to let this be relinquished easy. And, Trump, I've mentioned, he's got some very dangerous progressions going over. He's got Neptune conjuncting the moon. And he's also got a Pluto, it's a Neptune square sun, I believe. I'm not looking at his chart right now, but we'll comment on this on further podcasts. But very dangerous. He's got to watch poisoning. He's got to watch subterfuge. I don't think the bullets are going to whiz past his head anymore. They're going to try other angles to take him out. And this is nothing new. This was reportedly had happened to Woodrow Wilson. So, we talked about him a minute ago. I don't believe Wilson probably wanted to do what he did, because on his deathbed, he actually said, I sold my country and I feel horrible about it. And yet, he was coerced into doing it. So again, when you're dealing in the quarters of power, it is a dangerous place to be. And what I like is there's an ancient story about the formation of every great nation. An ascended master showed up, and reportedly Manly P. Hall actually told this to me, and he also mentioned it in a book, in the Secret Teachings of All Ages, that an ascended master shows up and they only eat fruit off the vine. And apparently every one of the signers of the Declaration of Independence revered this person, and they did everything he suggested. And after the signing, that was it. He disappeared. And of course, we know what happened, the Revolutionary War. And here we are today. So, it's like Reagan said, freedom is not easy. It's always going to be eroded. The demonic spirits are always going to try and destroy the human race, but they never win. They can't win because creation itself rains down into the whole molecular structures of this world, or whatever you want to call it. I mean, you look at the divinity of creation. I don't care if you're looking at a human being, an animal, a plant, or a mineral. This is a reality machine here, and it really, truly is. And I think the experiment of the United States, at least in this conscious era and what they call a yuga, has been a good go, even though it's had its, faults. Its concept is amazing, and the more we can maintain it, the better it is. And I hope tomorrow is a beginning of return to the old United States as a republic, and also where it expands and grows. And I think it's going to. I really do. I think Trump's idea of tariffs, and I'll get hate mail for this. Oh, Trump's bad. He's evil. No. I mean, people got to look at what is really going on here with kind of a level head, and stop listening to propaganda and start looking at facts. I mean, we are $36 trillion in debt, and this is a big deal. Not something to be sneered at. I mean, I always mention this: $36 trillion is inconceivable when you think about it. I always say a billion seconds, you're just a little over 40 years old. At 80 years old, you're just about 2 billion seconds old. Now, if you take a trillion seconds, just fathom this, it's 11,700 and something odd years. I forget all the details, but it's over 11,700 something years.
Wow.
Just think about that. That's the difference between a billion and a trillion. So, it's,
Wow.
when you look at a second and you put that in perspective to dollars, it kind of goes, wow. So we are, literally heading towards the ground at full speed with no landing gear. And if somebody doesn't pull us up, we could crash and burn. And we got the BRICS nations. We got this Uranus going over these fixed stars, a very dangerous time, exceedingly dangerous time. And I think we've had some very powerful people, not just Biden. Biden has even said he didn't even know. It was interesting. I just listened to a thing on Speaker Johnson, who went into the White House. He was trying to get to meet Biden last year, and they wouldn't let him meet him. And he thought, this is strange. I'm the Speaker of the House. He says, I got to be able to meet with the president. So finally, they let him in. And he got talking with Joe Biden, and everybody was sitting around him, to make sure that he didn't say anything wrong. And Biden actually said, please, can you all get out of here and let me talk to the speaker by myself? You can read this. It's on or hear this. It's on the YouTube channel. And what was amazing is Johnson said, that Biden said he didn't realize he signed certain executive orders. And he said, well, wait a minute, you signed it. How could you not know that? He said, well, I didn't sign that. He said, I signed something for research. I didn't realize that it would have this effect. So this is a very interesting thing that could come unraveled too during this next administration, is who was really running this country. And again, this is the Pluto return. And many people have been out there, and I know I've seen it, some very questionable things. A couple of times I've looked at the TV camera and go, wait a minute, that's not Biden's eyes. That's not his voice. That's not, we've all seen the strangeness going on. I think we've had a Manchurian candidate in here, and it's been pretty wild what's been happening. So we have, again, a real war between the globalists and the nationalists, and Donald Trump coming in is just the beginning of where all this is, because not only did they try to destroy the United States with this immigration influx, they've done it to Europe. They've done it all over the world, any of the westernized countries. They're trying to put in global communism. And, again, I don't want to get political here, but that's what the astrology chart shows. We're going to see a clash of the Titans here finish. And that's the Pluto conjunct the sun. That's the Uranus in the ascendant. So this is going to be an interesting time, a very, very interesting time.
Quite interesting. Quite interesting. Thank you, Jeff, so much for all of this. Thank you.
You are so welcome. And I would tell you that, we'll keep going here. We'll get some more, podcasts here going on. I want to get more into detail on Trump and things like that and his chart, because we have some really interesting energies at play in Donald Trump's chart.
We
So
do.
everybody, thanks for listening, and we'll see where it all
Yeah.
goes here.
I just wanna let you know that so many people are sending their condolences, such kind, heartwarming messages
Oh yeah,
to you.
yeah,
I'll show
yeah.
them to you later. And thank you very much, Jeff. Thank you all.
Oh,
So
you're so welcome. You know, it's interesting about my dad. He had such a sharp mind. I never knew how he met my mom. And my dad was a real mechanic. I grew up around welding, mechanics, and you name it, all that stuff. And apparently he was working on a hot rod in the late 50s. And he dropped the light on the sidewalk because he was in the driveway. And two girls were walking by, and this girl picks up a light, hands it back to him. That was my mom. That's how they met. So,
and
pretty
they
wild.
were teenagers.
Yeah,
Yeah.
wild. So you talk about karma, you know.
Okay.
And I was the wedding present, by the way. They were so young. My mom was 18. My dad was just turning 19. So, yeah,
So young.
that's tough when you get
Yeah.
that young.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. It's all karmic.
yeah,
Karmic.
you bet it is. Oh, you bet. And we never know when that magic is going to shift around and something happens. And it's interesting about astrology because it shows these windows when these probabilities happen.
Yeah.
So I looked at my mother's chart and I thought, well, why did she have me, she got, pregnant when she was 17 and had me at 18, and I could see why, because Jupiter was actually transiting her moon and she had a really good yoga for conceiving. So, and she did. So
There you have
of
it.
course I had two brothers after that.
There comes Jeff Harmon.
Yeah, there you go. Out we come. It's how we all got here,
Yep.
So,
Yep. Yeah.
all right.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you,
You are
everyone.
so welcome.
Take good care. See you next
You
time.
bet. Bye now.